Near the Sun, an interstellar visitor changed speed and course, without the plume every model demands. If outgassing did it, telescopes should have caught a mountain's worth of bright debris. They didn't. The math wants reaction mass. The cameras returned mostly quiet frames. Either we missed the evidence, or something moved without the exhaust we count on. This is the 10th anomaly, the one that could force us to redraw rules rather than just revise parameters. Here is why. Somewhere inside the glare, a body from another star nudged itself off the path gravity wrote for it. Numbers that should agree did not. Positions drifted by hairline steps that would not cancel. Spectra bent where dust should redden, yet blue crept in. The question is simple. To change momentum, you need a force. For comets, it's vents of gas dragging dust. A small rocket push. If the push happened, the receipt should be visible, a coma wide and a tail long. If the sky stays empty, the question won't. Interstellar visitors are rare. The first we ever caught, 1I/Oumuamua, rushed past too fast and too dim for comfort. We had a handful of nights, not a season. Shape and spin were guesses with error bars fat as fists. The second, 2I/Borisov, behaved like home. A textbook comet, only from away. It outgassed, it reddened, it wore its physics on its sleeve. Together they drew a narrow corridor for expectations, either fast and weird but probably faint, or bright and ordinary with dust to match. The third refuses both scripts. 3I/Atlas arrives with a ledger that won't balance. Its brightness climbs faster than dust should allow, then steadies like a machine with a governor. Its color leans blue when the sun says, redder. Its trajectory fits gravity, until it doesn't by a margin too tidy to blame on calibration drift. There's a difference between unusual and wrong. Unusual stretches a model. Wrong bends a law. If this is a rocket, where is the exhaust? We begin with the catalog. 9 anomalies, each small on its own. Together they suggest that the 10th, a net push without a plume, deserves the weight we are about to put on it. Trajectory. Random interstellar arrivals should cut across the ecliptic at many angles. They come from everywhere. They go to anywhere. What we see here is a path that schemes the plane and does it retrograde to common traffic. Like driving the wrong way but hugging the highway line. Selection effects can prefer near-ecliptic finds. Sky surveys look where planets live. Even so, the precision is high enough to ask whether bias explains all of it. Next, we test that by comparing against survey coverage in time and sky coordinates. If bias did this, the pattern repeats with other finds. If it does not, geometry owes us more. Timing. Encounters with major masses should be sparse accidents. Here the sequence brushes resonance zones and magnetized space the way a fingertip grazes harp strings. Too much timing looks like choreography when you stack it on a wall. Coincidence happens. Clusters happen. But when several weak coincidences pile up, you count them. Our next pass is to weight each timing coincidence by prior probability and ask whether the product stays ordinary. Size and speed. Compared with 1I and 2I, this visitor reads larger, faster, or both depending on the assumed albedo. Make the surface darker and the size grows, make it brighter and the size falls. But even across ranges, the implied momentum budget for any non-gravitational drift sits above what the dust we see can buy. We check this with photometry tied to phase angle and distance. If we are wrong about size, the curve will show it. Composition. Gas-to-dust ratios, if the early spectra hold, tilt carbon-rich and water-light. That hints at formation farther from warmth, where CO and CO2 condense but water ice may be buried or locked. It could be natural. It could be a matter of crust and pores. We mark this as preliminary. If confirmed, it pushes the object toward an origin in a colder nursery and a behavior that prefers gas over grains. Low water fraction. Order of magnitude reads suggest only a few percent water compared to carbon species. For a dirty snowball, that is low. Dirty snowballs redden and shed. This one, at times, neither. Possibility, hidden layers or exotic ices sublimate with little dust. Another, the active vents are small and fast, with particles too fine to scatter light well. We put a pin here. It matters for the missing receipt. Polarization. At small phase angles, the light should carry a familiar polarimetric signature for dusty Comey. A negative minimum, then a rise, with depth tied to grain size and refractive index. Here the curve dips shallower and recovers oddly. The pattern whispers gas-dominated or unusual particles. It does not shout. Calibrations near the sun's limb are hard. We reserve judgment but keep the flag raised. Brightness and color. Dust makes comets redder as they warm. Light scatters off rough grains and boosts longer wavelengths. This object drifts bluer in segments where dust should win. That points to fluorescence from gas lines or an ultrafine dust population that falls below easy detection. If gas leads, we should see lines. If lines are faint, either the gas is thin but efficient or our slits miss the show. Both are testable. Morphology. Tails point away from the sun. Antitails can appear by geometry, but the physics behind them is still dust. Images here show a compact coma with episodic, narrow extensions. Some frames hint at a sunward spike. Geometry can impersonate defiance. Rotation can strobe jets into and out of our view. Time series imaging will tell us which role is being played. Direction and coincidence. The broad sector of arrival, while not proof of anything, grazes regions of sky where past radio oddities have been catalogued. Not the wow signal, not a myth, just a footnote that people will ask about. We mention it to park the coincidence where it belongs, as a curiosity without weight. 9 anomalies do not make a miracle. They do make a case for a 10th. The residual. The push. To change momentum, you need a force. That is the law we do not bend. For comets, the force arrives as jets, ice turns to gas, gas accelerates through cracks and vents, dust hitches a ride. The nucleus recoils by a whisper, again and again, until the whisper counts. We can price the push. A few meters per second of delta V over weeks to months, a small number, multiplied by a large mass is a big impulse. Pay it in exhaust and the bill comes due in debris. A small mountain's worth over time, if the estimates hold. A mountain is a figure of speech here, but the idea stands: lots of dust, lots of gas, lots to see. The observed offset implies a push big enough to require a debris budget we cannot yet find. That is the ledger that will not close. We face 4 possibilities. First, the cloud exists, but our eyes missed it. Geometry can hide a veil if the tail lies along our sight line. Phase can mute contrast against the sky. Instruments can saturate near the sun's edge. If true, deep stacks and well-timed elongations will lift a faint, extended glow above the floor. We will look for width growth, for a coma that fattens with time, for color indices that drift red as dust takes over. Second, the jets are real and efficient, but dust poor. Certain gases can scream out at high speed with little grain drag, turning little mass into meaningful thrust. Narrow vents, well aimed, raise the effective efficiency. If so, spectra should be stronger than images. Blue-ward trends should hold. Line intensities in CO and CO2 bands should correlate with the timing of position residuals. We will test that with time-tagged spectroscopy. Third, systematics. Calibration gremlins wear many masks. Astrometry can warp near the sun. Point spread functions can mimic motion. Reference catalogs contain their own small tilts. If that is the story, independent instruments should disagree. Different pipelines should wash it out. We have begun those crosschecks and will continue them. We invite nulls as much as we invite signals. Fourth, a non-standard mechanism. Radiation pressure can push small things a lot and big things a little. Solar wind can couple to ions. Magnetic fields can twist neutral flows indirectly. These are edge case drivers for a body of this implied size. But edge cases sometimes matter. If one is at work, we expect odd dependencies on distance and geometry. Polarity flips with solar rotation. Polarimetry that refuses dust patterns. Radio silence even when dynamics speak. We will test those, too. A rocket that climbs with no flame invites two checks. Is the flame hidden, or is it not a rocket at all? In the control rooms the most honest sound is the air. Fans like a soft river. Screens strobing a slow liturgy of numbers, UTC, air mass, S/N, FWHM. Outside, the desert's cold makes the metal honest. On some nights the sun is a thin arc under the horizon, the sky a thin steel sheet. You wait for a pale point where the ephemeris says it should be. You wait for the guiding stars to lock. For arc seconds is a hair across a football field. It should not be the difference between true and false. And yet, nights turn on hairs. Stack enough hairs, and you have a rope. Our stacks say there is a rope. Our images say there should be fibers all around it. The fibers are late, thin, or hiding. We return to context without lecturing it. Oumuamua set the language, fast, odd, arguable. Borisov set the antidote, bright, ordinary, instructive. 3I/Atlas stands between them and off to the side. It is interstellar enough to carry mystery. It is comet-like enough to tempt us into familiar explanations. It is stubborn enough to resist them. The word receipt keeps recurring for a reason. Science loves invoices. If momentum moved, something paid. Pay in dust, and the sky should redden and stretch. Pay in gas, and spectra should remember the date. Pay in geometry, and rotation should keep time. Pay in light, and radiation pressure should follow the sun's hand. Each is a hypothesis with litmus tests attached. Pass. Fail. Pending. No adjectives needed. A picture forms of a body with vents that do not perform like the local comets we know. Its jets, if they exist, are tight. Its dust, if present, is fine. Its spectrum, when it shows, leans to carbon lines over water. Its path brushes spaces where gravity is not the only actor, plasma sheets, magnetospheres, places where charged particles draw their own maps in the dark. These are not conclusions. These are places to point instruments. We allow ourselves a careful image. Imagine a rocket on a fogless night. It climbs. You expect a plume against the black. You see motion but not the flare. Perhaps the plume is faint. Perhaps your eyes are poor. Perhaps the exhaust is invisible in this light. All true, at times. The next step is obvious. Change the light, sharpen the eyes, widen the lens. Ask the same question again and again until the answer repeats. There is one more comparison that refuses to sit down. In systems like ours, gas giants own the architecture. They broker comets, sculpt belts, stir plasma. They are engines as much as planets. If an interstellar body with an unpriced push schemes near the largest engine, the bookkeeping matters more. We do not say anything has happened. We say that if something did, the footprints would appear first in a place that leaves wide signatures, the giant's fields and the ballet of his moons. On paper, it should be simple. Take the measured residuals. Translate them into delta V per unit time. Multiply by a plausible nucleus mass. Divide by an exhaust velocity and an efficiency number. Out drops a mass loss rate and a total bill. Then ask where that mass went. Some into dust. some into gas. All into photons we can, in principle, catch. If the photons refuse to appear, we either mispriced the bill, miscounted the photons, or fooled ourselves with the residuals. A field grows up when it enforces that choice without romance. At a certain hour the sun comes back, low and clean. The dome is a silhouette. A coyote leaves signatures in frost, clean sine waves that end at a fence. You think about ends. You think about ledgers. You think about how patient light is. It keeps what happened and sends it everywhere, one scattered wave at a time. We can retrieve those waves if we keep our methods dull and sharp at once. Why it matters is not drama. It is prediction. Either way, prediction improves. With a plume, we recalibrate dust-to-gas budgets for interstellar comets. We update non-grav terms in ephemerides. We widen or narrow cones of uncertainty for bodies that cross important lanes. Without a plume, we reconsider what a push can be and what it should look like to our tools. We add litmus tests to our standard operating procedures. We add humility to press notes. Neither is a defeat. There is also safety. If trajectories can drift for reasons we do not yet measure well, alerts must fatten early. Cones must get wide before they get precise. The public must see cones, not headlines. Planetary defense is a chain of boring steps done on time. This object gives that chain a new link: pay attention to quiet pushes. A final layer is philosophical but still operational. We do not say technology. We say speculative and attach tests. Our instruments do not know romance. They click. They give counts and angles. If a non-outgassing push ever survives every natural test, the word design will come attached to information, not to wonder. Patterns first. Stories later. In the coming observing window, instruments from orbit and desert floors will turn to the same patch of sky. We will probe for dust we might have missed and shifts we cannot ignore. Morphology for growth in width and length. Photometry for color that chooses a side. Spectra with time stamps. Polarimetry that tells us grain size or the lack of grains. Astrometry on independent catalogs. Radio ears kept open, but low in priority, in case plasma sings when rock and light do not. Hold the 10th anomaly in mind as the lens, not the headline. Acceleration without a matching debris budget is a ledger that refuses to close. Either the exhaust is there and shy, or the push comes cheap in a way we have not priced. The next window will write in the margin. If the sky stays quiet, the explanation won't. The screen is black except for a single sentence, white on charcoal. Price the push. Count the missing receipt. The dome is quiet. The fans hum. Somewhere far below the horizon of our instruments, the sun presses its steady force into everything that moves. Against that ordinary weight, 3I/Atlas keeps drifting in a way that arithmetic should reconcile and the sky refuses to show. We begin with the smallest honest nouns in mechanics: mass, velocity, momentum. No slogans, no myths. Just the bookkeeping of motion. Momentum is the kind of truth that refuses adjectives. P equals m times v. If you change momentum, you paid a bill. For comets, the bill is usually paid with exhaust. Ice warms, gas vents, dust hitches a ride, and the nucleus recoils, slightly, persistently, exactly as rockets do when they shed propellant. Cometary thrust is a whisper that adds up. The problem with 3I/Atlas is not that thrust would be impossible. The problem is that the amount of thrust implied by its track should be visible as a trail of payment in dust and gas. It isn't, at least, not where and when the arithmetic demands. So we price the push. Line by line. We will keep the language simple and the ranges wide. Let delta V be the integrated change in the object's velocity that isn't explained by gravity alone. The astrometry says it's small in absolute terms, meters per second, but significant for an interstellar body that should be coasting. Let m be the mass of the nucleus. We don't know it exactly. We don't pretend to. We bracket it with plausible values based on brightness, assumed albedo, and reasonable densities for porous ices and dust-rich rock. Let VE be the effective exhaust speed of the vented gas, how fast molecules leave once they sublimate. On comets, this ranges from a few hundred meters per second to over a kilometer per second, depending on composition, temperature, and geometry. Let eta, ETA, be the efficiency, a single, honest parameter that collects all the ways reality wastes momentum. Jets that don't point the same way. Rotation that smears thrust across directions. Vents that sputter off-axis. If eta equals 1, every molecule is a disciplined soldier marching in the same direction. If eta, 1, the army spreads and cancels itself. For crude, but serviceable accounting, the momentum balance reads m_ejecta times VE is almost equal to m times delta V / eta. On the left is the paid impulse. Mass of ejecta times exit speed. On the right is what the nucleus bought, a small change in its big momentum, penalized by inefficiency. This isn't a lecture. It's a receipt. Brightness is a liar until you set its terms. Albedo, the fraction of light an object reflects, turns a faint rock bright or a bright rock faint. So we bracket. Low mass scenario, dark, porous body, higher albedo than feared but smaller than guessed, m, 1 times 10 superscript 1 kg. Think of a modest hill fused into ice and dust. That is still 10 billion kilograms, roughly the mass of a small mountain's worth of frozen rubble. Mid-mass scenario, conservative central estimate, m, 5 times 10 superscript 1 kg. Half 100 billion kilograms, closer to the kind of nuclei we sometimes infer from equally faint interlopers. High-mass scenario, darker, larger, denser, m, 1 times 10 superscript 1 kg. 100 billion kilograms, heavier, tougher to budge. We keep the book open. We do not choose a favorite. The ranges matter, not pretend precision. Let delta V be a few meters per second over the span of the observing arc, the astrometric residuals imply numbers in that neighborhood. Use V values between 300 meters per second, a sleep event, and 1000 to 1500 meters per second, a brisk, heated flow. Sweep eta from 0.2, messy, canceling jets, to 0.5, disciplined, but not perfect, and up to 1.0, idealized, probably unrealistic. We compute verbally, we explain in images. Case A, mid-mass, mid-exhaust, mid-efficiency. M equals 5 times 10 superscript 1 kg, delta V equals 5 meters per second, VE equals 1000 meters per second, eta equals 0.5. Then m_ejecta is almost equal to m times delta V, / eta times VE, is almost equal to 5 times 10 superscript 1 times 5 close parenthesis divided by open parenthesis 0.5 times 1000 close parenthesis. That is, 2.5 times 10 superscript 1 / 500 almost equals 5 times 10 kg, roughly 500,000 tons. 500,000 tons is not the moon, but it is not mist. If a comet vents that much stuff, it usually shows it, coma, tail, dust continuum, polarized light, bright gas lines that thicken around perihelion. The sky carries the ink of that payment. Case B, same M, same delta V, higher efficiency. Eta 1.0, everything else as above. Now m_ejecta is almost equal to 2.5 times 10 kg, we have the bill. Still 250,000 tons. Still the kind of bill we expect to read in dust. Case C, same M, same delta V, faster exhaust. V 1500 meters per second with eta equals 0.5. Now m_ejecta is almost equal to minus 3.3 times 10 kg. Faster exhaust is cheaper. The receipt shrinks, but it remains a ledger line thick enough to catch light. Case D, lower mass, best case geometry. M equals 1 times 10 superscript 1 kg, delta V equals 3 meters per second, VE equals 1500 meters per second, eta equals 1.0. M underscore ejecta is almost equal to 3 times 10 superscript 1 slash 1500 almost equals 2 times 10 kg. 20 million kilograms. That's on the low end, a smaller, more invisible bill. But even 20 million kilograms vented as a dust-poor, gas-heavy flow should, over time, mark itself in spectra and faint morphology. Gas glows. Ion lines chirp. Color curves tilt. Polarization shifts. Case E, high mass, messy jets. M equals 1 times 10 superscript 1 kg, delta V equals 5 meters per second, VE equals 300 meters per second, eta equals 0.2. M underscore ejecta is almost equal to 5 times 10 superscript 1 slash 60 almost equals 8.3 times 10 kg. Billions of kilograms. That is a continent of frost, unreasonable unless the sky is ablaze with the dust of it. It isn't. We keep the conservative envelope in mind. The true expense is likely hundreds of millions of kilograms, not billions, if the exhaust is brisk and well aimed. But even that conservative expense wants to be seen. So why isn't it? One way to shrink the receipt without lying about the purchase is to be clever about geometry. If a single active vent points consistently in the same direction while the nucleus rotates in step, the vector of thrust can accumulate more efficiently than a chaotic spray would allow. That pushes eta upward, toward 0.6, 0.8, even flirting with 1.0 if nature is uncharacteristically disciplined. There's precedent for directional vents on comets. Rosetta watched 67P cough in jets that were anything but isotropic. Halley strutted fans. Hale, Bopp wore plumes like banners. But directed jets leave footprints. Photometric periodicity, turning bodies beat a rhythm into the light curve, bright as the vent faces sun, dimmer as it turns away. Asymmetric comi, not perfect spheres but lopsided veils that grow in a preferred direction. Polarization signatures, the plane of scattered light leans with the dust grains, announcing their sizes and alignments. Spectral timing, gas lines that wax and wane on the vent schedule. 3I/Atlas shows hints but refuses the orchestra. The light curve has flirtations with periodicity but never commits. The coma, to the extent we can even call it that, stays austere. Polarization does not parade. Spectra whisper gas with weak consonants and uncertain vowels. The timing, above all, beats to a different drummer. When the physics asks to see a jet's clock, the data raise a magnet's hand. We stand in a museum of examples to calibrate our surprise. Hale, Bopp, 1997, was an exuberant spender. It paid in dust and gas, wrote receipts so bright they shone in city skies. The mass lost over its showy season lurks in the hundreds of millions to billions of kilograms. The tale was not a rumor, it was a declaration. Halley, 1986, wore classic signatures, resolved jets, structured coma, strong CN and OH bands. Momentum changes were no secret, thrust left thermodynamic fingerprints. 67P/Churyumov, Gerasimenko, Rosetta's careful ward, taught us the grammar of cometary vents, narrow jets, cliffs that spatter dust, diurnal patterns of activity. Mass loss per perihelion was tens to hundreds of millions of kilograms, observed, weighed, photographed at handshake distance. Against these, 3I/Atlas is not silent, but it is stingy. The gas-to-water ratios lean CO heavy, the dust shows reluctance, and the morphology prefers a monk's robe to a parade uniform. If it spent as much momentum as the track implies, the paper trail should be more verbose. Unless the spending is unusually efficient, or the material is exotic, or the engine isn't a vent at all. We keep the natural options on the table first. That is the discipline. We do not decide. We frame what remains testable. A. Big mass loss, dust included, the canonical bill. Prediction: fattening coma, lengthening tail, color drifting redward as dust dominates, polarization that fits known size distributions. Arithmetic: m_ejecta in the 1010 kg class over the window. Status: disfavored by current morphology, pending deeper stacks. If A wakes up late, the sky will redden and stretch on cue. B. High-efficiency gas jets, dust poor, the frugal spender. Prediction: strong, timed CO/CO2 lines, blue-leaning color trends, light curve modulation synchronized with delta-V episodes. Arithmetic: m_ejecta reduced by higher VE and eta, still greater than or equal to 1010 kg. Status: partly supported by CO hints, undercut by weak timing correlation, pending high S/N spectra during the next push. C. Geometric boost plus rotation, the aimed engine. Prediction: persistent asymmetry, stable polarization angle, photometric periodicity. Arithmetic: the same delta V at lower m_ejecta thanks to vector discipline, eta near unity. Status: tempting but under-evidenced. The rhythm on the light curve looks more like a distant field's rotation than the nucleus's. D. Non-venting force, the red flag class, radiative/plasma/other. Prediction: delta V trends decoupled from gas signatures, correlations to heliocentric geometry or ambient fields, unusual polarimetric behavior, possibly no classical dust receipt at all. Arithmetic: ejecta bill approaches zero in extreme cases, momentum sourced from field interactions rather than mass loss. Status: speculative by definition, cannot be adopted without eliminating a C at operative sensitivity. The magnetospheric whispers near Jupiter make D impossible to ignore and irresponsible to embrace without strict tests. This is not a menu of beliefs. It is a decision tree the sky will walk us through. Part 4 will set the litmus tests: morphology growth, timed gas lines, rotational fingerprints. Pass 2, and a scenario gets favored. Fail 2, and a scenario retires. Pending means we watch again. Tonight, we stay with the arithmetic. No number exists in a vacuum. The anomaly's faint oscillation, 19 hours, keeps brushing past Jupiter's magnetic rotation like a coat sleeve catching on a nail. Once is curiosity. Twice is déjà vu. 3 times invites a new whiteboard. Physics does not ask us to replace jets with poetry. It asks us to consider how a neutral, dust-poor outflow moving through a structured, rotating plasma might steal a small, persistent push without flaunting a plume. How charge exchange could bias trajectories. How an object traversing gradients of Alfvénic turbulence could experience effective drag or lift that our pedestrian jet models don't capture. These words are not claims. They are questions with math behind them, workshopped in rooms where engineers and heliophysicists share stale coffee and a time budget. If 3I/Atlas draws impulse from field coupling instead of mass loss, the receipt would live in timing and radio more than in dust. The glow would be faint, the lines inconsistent, the polarization quirky, the delta V smooth and eerily disciplined. It would also, if we are unlucky, synchronize with Jovian sectors as the object enters their influence. We are not there yet. To reach for D before a C are pinned would be to betray the craft. But the Jupiter coincidence haunts the ledger like an unexplained deposit. Every assumption we made can shift. Shrink the nucleus by 30% and M nearly halves, m_ejecta falls with it. Increase VE from 500 to 1000 meters per second, and the bill halves again. Raise eta from 0.2 to 0.6, the bill drops by a factor of 3. Lower delta V with a more conservative astrometric fit, and everything softens. Push all those levers and you purchase a story in which tens of millions of kilograms, not hundreds, were enough. The sky might plausibly hide such a thrifty bill if dust grains are large, dim in reflection, if jets are so-rich, bluer, subtler, and if we observed in hostile geometries. But you cannot move every lever to its most forgiving position without being honest about the improbability of the combination. Nature can be stingy, but she rarely colludes to hide exactly what we most need to see, unless we are asking the wrong instrument the right question. Which is why the next window matters. We will ask every instrument the same question. In a basement lab where the projector bulbs are older than the graduate students, a chalkboard holds 4 lines. P equals M times V. M underscore ejecta times VE is almost equal to M times delta V / eta. Receipts live where energy leaves. If the sky withholds the receipt, we mispriced the push, or misnamed the engine. No one photographs the board. No one needs to. It is the sort of chalk that dusts you for days. They run one more set of numbers. They compare to Hale, Bop again, Halley again, 67p again. The same conclusion keeps stepping back onto the stage. Comets that spend this much momentum usually wear it in dust. If 3I/Atlas paid without glitter, then either the material is abnormal, the exhaust is steeper and purer than the textbooks celebrate, the geometry is improbably perfect, or the force is not an exhaust at all. No one says, new physics. They say, pending sensitivity. They say, supports and disfavors. They say, insufficient. They underline, if confirmed. It is the vocabulary of adults in a discipline that learned how to live with not knowing without pretending to know. Part 4 will not be a poem. It will be an audit. Morphology: if dust pays, the sky lengthens, coma growth and tail stretch beyond last week's envelope. If it does not, A weakens. Timed spectra: if gas lifts the mass, spectra remember the date, CO/CO2 should spike with delta V. If they don't, B weakens. Rotation/polarimetry: if vents steer, rotation keeps time, periodic light curves, stable polarization angles. If the beat is absent, C weakens. Astrometric discipline: if a non-venting force acts, delta V holds without classical signatures and may correlate with heliocentric or magnetospheric geometry. The D-class trails its own kind of ink. 2 out of 3 against disfavor a scenario. 2 out of 3 for promoted, provisionally. Pending stays honest. Numbers don't shout, they reconcile. If you want a single sentence for the wall. Either dust prints the receipt, or we rename the cashier. In the vacuum of a spreadsheet, correlation is a coward. It pretends to be coincidence to avoid responsibility. In the real sky, a repeated brush with a rotating magnetic sector starts to look like a coupling auditioning for a part. We do not say coupling as a verdict. We say it as a constraint on the next round of tests. If a non-gravitational delta V keeps its habit of stiffening as 3I/Atlas traverses certain Jovian longitudes, the case for field-mediated impulse crosses from poetry to protocol. If it evaporates, we relieved ourselves of a ghost and returned to jets with a cleaner conscience. That is the dignity of a field that lets itself be wrong, but only once per hypothesis. In the last hour before the observing window opens, a few of us stand outside the dome. The desert smells like dust and old electricity. A thin crescent of light edges the east. Somewhere in that immensity the object keeps its small, steady promise, a residual that behaves like a push. A message pings the operations channel: Juno has posted a pre-window status. Routine. Dry. Buried in the telemetry is a footnote no one requested. Background radio chorus nominal. Minor modulations at 19-hour period persist, amplitude within noise. No operational impact anticipated. Within noise. Within noise. The phrase that can mean nothing, or the first stair step up. We file back into the dome. The telescopes will soon write 2 words on the night: pass or fail, and sometimes the harder truth: pending. If dust appears on schedule, the bill is paid and the books balance. If spectra sing on time, the engine is a jet and the rest is geometry. If neither arrives and the push holds, we have mispriced the push, or misnamed the engine. The shutters open. The sensors cool. A new file tree blossoms on a server that complains but obeys. Either the comet prints the receipt, or we change the hypothesis class. The first frame is a checklist on a slate gray monitor. 3 boxes, 3 words beside each. Morphology. Spectra by date. Periodicity/polarimetry. A gloved hand drags the cursor across the screen, highlighting each line in turn as if to underline a vow. No drama, only tests. Outside, the desert has not yet decided to be morning. Inside, the room is all measured light and instrument hum, a sanctum where suspicion is a professional virtue. 3 litmus tests, the principal observer says. Pass 2 and we provisionally favor jets. Fail 2 and we retire the canonical bill. No one nods. They don't have to. The ritual has already settled in their bones. What the physics would like to see. A coma that fattens predictably as insolation rises, a tail that lengthens and narrows with heliocentric geometry, a surface brightness profile that steepens toward the nucleus, faint, fan-like asymmetries tracing individual vents, a dust continuum that reddens by degrees as grains size up and scatter more warmly. In plain language, if momentum is being bought with dust and gas, the sky should hold the receipt as texture and spread. How we agree to look. Stacked imaging through broadband and narrowband filters from 3 sites on 3 continents, synchronized within tens of minutes. Automated background subtraction that respects the faintest halos. Reference stars bin to check seeing and transparency. A control comet imaged the same night to stress test the pipeline. The algorithm, a modest tyrant, will flag growth exceeding last week's envelope. What the screens confess. The first night stacks bloom on the central monitor as thin, luminescent mandorlas, ovals of faintness shaped as much by optics as by reality. The analyst adjusts gamma with an ascetic's restraint. If a tail wants to be seen, we will not bully it into existence. The control comet, an ordinary, sun-kissed rock, obliges the textbooks. You can feel the geometry in it, a brightened core, a patient sweep, the suggestion of a streamer. The pipeline whistles softly and prints its verdict in a thin sans serif font, coma growth plus 7.2%, tail length plus 9.8% versus last control stack. The interstellar visitor resists choreography. Its halo gains a hair's breadth, so little the software refuses to call it growth without a human signature. The center stays laconic, the outskirts restrained. There is a whisper of asymmetry off sunward, the sort of false lead that can be seen masquerading as physics. The pipeline prints delta morphology, 2.1%, below threshold, and waits for someone to overrule it. No one does. Again tomorrow, says the observer. And the day after. Morphology is a slow verdict. They are good at waiting, these people. But they do not wait idly. What the physics would like to hear. If gas is doing the pushing. The lines remember the dates. CO and CO2 should wax as delta V episodes accumulate. OH should sing in the near UV if water joins the chorus. The ratio should evolve in a way that a cometary cookbook could predict, bluer early, reddening as larger dust grains join, lines cresting near periods of stronger heating or favorable geometry. If the engine is a jet, the engine leaves a schedule in light. How we agree to listen. A roll-up of slit spectra across 4 nights, each time stamped to an atomic clock and cross-calibrated against known lamps and standard stars. CO in the near IR, a stubborn chase for CN and C2 in the optical, a speculative reach for CO2 via proxy. We will accept nothing that does not survive 2 reductions by 2 different people. What the prisms say when the room is quiet. The first spectra arrive like mail from a distant relative, courteous, faint, suggestive of stories but unwilling to gossip. There is CO, more than its reputation among comets would predict, but still a whisper. CN flickers like a firefly that refuses to stay caged. C2 limps, undecided between absence and shyness. The water proxy is a rumor the pipeline won't dignify. This would not be an indictment if the timing cooperated, if the line strengths rose in step with the astrometric delta V as measured, if the envelope of emission fattened on the same days the orbit fit stiffened. The logs do not bless us with such harmony. A mild crest in CO arrives out of step with the latest push. The night the residuals were clearest, the gas was least forthcoming. They re-reduce. They tighten and loosen apertures, test rival backgrounds, subtract and re-add the sky. On the third pass, the picture holds, gas is present, but it is not on the object schedule. Could be geometry, the spectroscopist says, and no one disputes it. The slits never rest exactly where you would script them to, light scattered off dust will muddy any song. But when the team overlays line flux against delta V, the plots avoid each other like estranged kin at a wedding. On the board, someone writes, lines not coeval with delta V, so far. No flourish, no verdict, only the line. What the physics would like to count. If jets steer the engine, the nucleus keeps time. Photometric periodicity draws a signature into the light curve, polarization angles tilt with grain alignment and stay tethered to the geometry of emission. A spinning, venting body is a clock with a personality. How we agree to count. High-cadence photometry through a stable filter set, across nights and long enough to resolve ambiguous aliasing. Simultaneous polarimetry whenever the weather allows, we know it often will not. We accept that the atmosphere can betray us with microvariations the pipeline has to forgive. What the cadence writes across midnight. The light curve paces like a patient in an antiseptic corridor, a quasi-period wavering around 19 hours, never sharp enough to boast, never faint enough to ignore. On control fields, the period disappears as it should, on the target, it survives. The team resists the urge to christen it rotation. They have made that mistake before with other things. Polarimetry, the fussiest witness, refuses melodrama. The angle drifts, its amplitude small, its mind undecided. A trained eye can convince itself the drift prefers a sector of the sky that, once you overlay the invisible map, brushes Jupiter's magnetic longitude. Another trained eye, no less honest, insists this is selection bias dressed as insight. Both are trying not to do theology in a data room. The board absorbs one more line, periodicity present but not diagnostic. Polarization, low amplitude, possible sector preference, unconfirmed. No one says we are out of road. They say we are entering the stretch where roads are made by the vehicles that travel them. Someone proposes a discipline break, a 5-minute defense of the canonical comet. It is a professional courtesy and a guardrail against narrative intoxication. Let the bill be dust, the defender says, almost ceremonially. Let exhaust be brisk, V high, eta close to unity by good luck and good geometry. Let the nucleus be smallish, the albedo higher than cynics would allow. We then reduce the required m_ejecta to the lower edge of plausibility, tens of millions of kilograms. If grains are large, subtle in reflection, and jet CO heavy, the coma can stay austere and the lines coy. With such thrift, our thresholds may simply not be bitten yet. It is a fair hypothesis, and no one who has ever watched nature cheat a laboratory will dismiss it for being charitable. The cross-examination is equally gentle. If thrift is the truth, then the timing still condemns us. Dust-poor jets should leave clear, date-stamped gas signatures. Our slits did not hear that speech on the days the trajectory demanded. If the periodicity is rotation, the light curve should lock phase with line strength. It did not. They agree to call the dust case pending, constrained by timing. Pending is not a shrug. Pending is a promise. A second defense rises, perhaps we have not given geometry enough credit. A single, high-latitude vent can, under some spin axis tilts, maintain a persistent thrust vector for days, even weeks. This allows eta to approach 1.0 without an obviously modulated light curve. If the axis points near our line of sight, periodicity can smear. The coma can remain modest if the surface is consolidated, dust reluctant to lift. The room allows the picture to form, a nucleus like a teetotaler, precise, frugal, unwilling to slosh. The examiner, same calm tone, pins a condition to the corkboard. Such discipline should leave a stable polarization angle aligned with the thrust geometry. We do not see that stability beyond noise. Moreover, delta-V episodes straddle Jovian sector crossings with unnerving regularity. A geometric vent model must either explain or ignore that. We may not have the right to ignore it. Again, the verdict, plausible, but under-evidenced, requires polarimetric confirmation and decoupling from Jovian timing. They do not close any door today. They mark it with tape and a note. No one is eager to podium the speculative, but the agenda does not flinch. If morphology and time spectra decline to print the receipt while delta-V persists, we must consider impulse without mass loss. The red flag class is theory's backroom: radiation pressure anomalies, plasma coupling, charge exchange drags and lifts, field-mediated interactions that take momentum from an environment rather than from an object's own exhaust. They start with the respectable mischief, radiation pressure. It can bias trajectories when dust is abundant and grains small. But here dust is stingy, and the non-gravitational acceleration is not screaming in the radial direction alone. The vector calculus doesn't smile on this option. Then plasma enters the conversation like weather does a garden party, first as idle chatter, then as the topic everyone has a story about. The heliosphere is not a placid pool. Currents, shocks, Alfvén waves, all the magnificent turbulence the sun exports, can do work when a body's exosphere offers a surface to push. Charge exchange can swap identities between neutral atoms and ions, reshaping momentum budgets in ways a textbook footnote does not make visceral. To prefer this class would be to accuse the sky of hiding the receipt in radio rather than in light, in timing rather than in morphology. That is not forbidden. It is merely demanding. The speculative reaches a finger toward taboo when Jupiter is introduced. Someone pulls a plot, 19-hour modulation in Juno's chorus data, formally within noise, persisting. Another plot, equally reluctant, shows delta-V kinks that prefer time windows when 3I/Atlas grazes magnetic longitude suggestive of sector boundaries. No one says, coupling, loudly. No one says, coincidence, with a smirk. They say what grown-ups say, constraint, hypothesis, to be tested. The red flag class is written on the board with a chaste parenthesis, speculative. Not to be adopted unless a C fail at operative sensitivity. Everyone signs that sentence with their silence. The plan for Part 5 has been cooking since the first hint of mischief. Now it hardens. The window is geometric and logistical, a 3-week corridor when the Sun, Earth, object, Jupiter configuration moves through a sweet spot for signal-to-noise and for possible magnetospheric entanglements. The protocol is strict. Pass, for jets palpable coma growth beyond previous week's envelope and/or gas lines that crest in phase with delta-V, plus a rotation signature that behaves like a Vent's clock. Fail, for jets morphology flat within thresholds and lines that refuse to keep time, while delta-V persists with discipline. Pending, any mix that cannot be accused of lying but refuses to speak clearly enough. Parallel to this, a radio and in-situ watch, poll Juno public choruses, parse them live, coordinate with ground-based radio arrays, solicit magnetometer data from Earth orbit assets whose sensor grants are less jealous than usual. We will not steal data, only what is released, but we will listen the way sailors once learned to read shore weather from gulls and cloud rags. A small, ferocious team, 2 heliophysicists, a data plumber, a statistician allergic to pareidolia, is seconded to this parallel lane. They have one rule: pre-register their tests before they run them. No ghost hunting. No moving thresholds after the fact. If 19 hours matters, they will say in advance how it matters. If the rockets are real, the radio will be quiet. If the radio hums on the same beat while the jets stay coy, we will not declare a discovery. We will declare a discrepancy with dignity. A control room with red pencils. A rooftop cat walking the parapet like it owns the instrument bay. A vending machine stocked with sugar and the particular despair of late-night food. These are not the stars of the documentary, but they are its weight-bearing walls. A postdoc pins a print of Hail, Bop on the corkboard, not as nostalgia but as a pressure gauge. This is what a spender looks like. This is what receipts look like when the cashier is honest and rich. Beside it, a print of 67 PS jets, chalk-white filaments trapped in Rosetta's proper shadow. The captions are handwritten, obvious. Then, under an image of our interstellar guest, if it's this, show it to us. No one speaks of careers, though everyone has one at stake. The eldest in the room is not the loudest. She says little and writes more. On her pad, a list in a tidy hand. Do not confuse absence with null. Do not confuse whisper with lie. Do not confuse coincidence with conspiracy. It is, in miniature, the moral code of their craft. 3 more nights, 3 more stacks. Morphology flirts with growth and then straightens its skirt. The tail, if tail it is, adds a centimeter on the calibrated screen, a rounding error in the life of anything cosmic. The pipeline lives by thresholds, the humans live by hunches. The thresholds, for now, are winning. Spectra deliver a small plot twist. CO brightens on a night when Delta V refuses to. The plot looks like a ladder with its rungs unevenly spaced. The genius of comets is that they can explain almost any such ladder with microphysics. The wisdom of observers is to admit when microphysics is a word we use to mean we don't know. The line on the board thickens, timing mismatch persists. Photometry tries to choose a period and keeps courting 19 hours with a fidelity that is almost flirting, almost rude. Polarimetry coughs up a night with amplitude just large enough to tempt the imagination. The sector preference hypothesis earns a second yellow sticky note: repeat or retract. The team resolves to do both. Across the gulf, Juno posts one of its blandly luminous PDFs. In the appendices the room cares about, the radio chorus acknowledges an oscillation. Within noise, the footnote repeats, like a mantra whose holiness is statistical. The noise is the point. You can drown truth in it and be proud of your honesty while you do. The heliophysicists on secondment do not grin. They sharpen their pre-registered tests and ready a statement template that reads like a judge with good bedside manners. We observed X, pre-registered. It aligns with Y within Z significance. We cannot claim causality between Jovian sector modulation and astrometric delta V. We can claim it is not random at the p = level. This is an invitation to disprove it. Science is at its best when it says come fight me and means it kindly. Tonight, under a wind that pretends to be a breeze. The phrase force without a trace is written in the logbook, not as poetry, but as an index tag. It is what you name a file when you do not want to contaminate it with hope. You could be forgiven, if you were watching this as a film, for craving thunder. For wanting the comet to unfurl a tail like a flag or the radio to light up like a choir. What you get instead are small numbers staking out a frontier, residuals measured in milliarcsecons, line fluxes huddled close to zero, polarization angles that have the decency to wobble. This is not failure. It is how reality consents to be known. A young coder, new to this dance but already fluent in its steps, adds a safeguard to the pipeline. If any morphology, growth, coincides with worse seeing, the growth is defaulted to pending until a human signs off. You can make a career out of not lying to yourself fast enough. The lead writes, "We will not salvage our preferred narratives with ad hoc corrections." The double asterisks are an indulgence and a promise. Part 5 is no longer a chapter, it is a calendar with red circles. The bridge from suspicion to verdict is built of procedures that sound drab and are glorious: flat fields, lamp checks, air mass corrections, time stamps that would satisfy a court. Pass, fail, Pending, 3 words given teeth by pre-commitments. Pass requires coeval signatures. The sky grows in the shapes dust makes on the nights the orbit says it should. The CO/CO2 lines crest within the same window. The light curves quasi-period ties its shoelaces and runs in step. Fail requires a clean emptiness. No growth past thresholds. No lines on cue. Delta V disciplined and indifferent to our interrogations. Pending is the honest middle where most truths live long enough to stop being romantic. Partial growth that could be weather, a line that spikes and then sours, a period that cannot keep a beat in 2 separate filters. Between these 3 gateposts, the film will walk. It is either nothing or the start of a different chapter. A side camera, the small, stubborn all-sky imager that logs meteors as a hobby and cloud edges as a vocation, catches an auroral whisper in the right patch of sky at the right wrong time. Not aurora at our poles, a high, thin radio glow that the software marks and the humans barely believe. Cross-checked 3 times, it remains a pink-lettered candidate. The heliophysics pair swallows it into their pre-registered maw. If the 19-hour modulation is not a fever dream, and if Juno's chorus is not an internal sneeze, and if this glow is not a plane, then we have 3 dots that would like to be a line. It is the law of their temple that 2 dots aren't a line and 3 dots are still a question. They print nothing. They flag. Flags are how you keep curiosity from dressing up as conclusions. A voiceover, the only one allowed a hint of warmth, steps into the frame. If physics seems slow here, that's because it is being kind. Fast physics is for explosions and fashion. Slow physics is for things we want to keep believing after the credits. When the receipt refuses to print, we do not say there was no purchase. We say the printer is jammed, the cashier is misnamed, or the shop is run on a currency we haven't learned to count yet. Part 5 will not turn the unknown into a trophy. It will weigh it again, in different light, and accept that sometimes the scales themselves are the mystery. The voice recedes. The room returns. The checklists remain. The dome shutters part with an elegance no one in the room is jaded enough to ignore. The sky has put on its best black. The object we argue about is a faint concentration no naked eye would ever dignify. This is the hour instruments were invented for. One last message arrives from the deep space feed, a maintenance notice stamped from Juno's log. It is the kind of procedural burp that rarely means anything. Buried in its technical stomach is a line the lead reads twice and then a third time. Scheduled high-rate downlink deferred 12 hours due to minor chorus contamination in nominal band pass. No mission risk. Expect routine. Chorus contamination. The phrase is bland enough to be nothing and precise enough to be not nothing. It hums, faintly, with the same 19-hour patience the room wants and refuses to trust. They do not cheer. They finalize exposure scripts, set the polarimeter's appetite, lock in the slits excursions, and pin the pass/fail/pending flowchart to an actual clipboard like it's 1978. Somewhere a kettle clicks. Somewhere a cat decides this is the hour it will not be caught. Somewhere the planet we graft our metaphors to keeps turning, unsentimental, generous with darkness and with light. Begin, says the observer, and the night obliges. If dust chooses this window to print the receipt, the ledger will balance and the red flag will fold itself away. If the lines sing on cue, geometry can have its bow. If neither happens and the push holds while a distant radio keeps time, then Part 5 will inherit not a solution but a shape to the doubt, the first honest outline of a cashier we did not name when we opened the store. The first exposure starts to count. The room goes still in the way only rooms full of moving minds can. The cursor hovers over a tab labeled Jupiter, external, and another labeled Delta V, live fit. The windows are arranged so both can be watched without looking like you're doing it. The camera cuts to the slit's ruby glow, to the polarimeter's patient glass, to the all-sky imager's obstinate eye. The air in the dome feels like a held note. Between pass and fail, there is a third word. For now, it is the only honest prophecy. Pending. The shutter opens with a sound like a zipper pulled across the night. Inside the dome the air holds its breath. Monitors idly glow. Checklists glare back in quiet type. On a corkboard, the protocol grid, pass/fail/pending, sits pinned like a weather map. The astronomers move in measured arcs, each gesture a practiced economy. Outside, the desert cools toward perfect seeing. Overhead the sky is a faithful, fathomless black. A white text banner on the main console stamps the hour. T00:12:21, window 1/7, Sun, Earth, 3I/Atlas, Jupiter geometry optimal. Someone clicks the intercom and the dome voice, modulated to a calm that feels ceremonial, says. Commencing live log. 0 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated, aperture, nominal. Guiding, 0.2 rms, humidity, honest. Wind, a rumor, then nothing. On the primary monitor, 3I/Atlas is a pinprick threaded with math. A rectangle crops it from the assertion of stars. To the right, a panel of small windows, morphology, spectra, photometry, polarimetry, asterometry delta V, and, in a separate column, Jupiter external with its own sub-windows, auroral UV, radio chorus, decametric emissions, magnetometer summary. Above them all hangs the scoreboard, for boxes labeled in plain language. A. Dust/gas jets, canonical. B. Geometric efficiency, high-eta single vent. C. Radiation/plasma coupling, natural field drive. D. Field-mediated/speculative, technological. Each box, for now, bears one word, pending. The lead observer, hair pulled back like a line drawn with a ruler, slides a finger along the touch glass and speaks into the log mic. Run the pass rubric in parallel. No deferred judgments. If it's a receipt, it prints tonight. The team does not nod. They never perform belief for each other. They just begin. 0:07 and 12 seconds Universal Time Coordinated, first stacked image lands. Noise maps are civilized. Star PSFs round and smug. The control comet, filed under obvious spender, flaunts a coma that grows like a lesson plan. 3I/Atlas presents itself in its familiar austerity. A thin halo, a barely fathomed wing sunward that could be anything from physics to prayer. The pipeline refuses to be goaded. Morphology panel prints a verdict in small, nearly apologetic text. Delta coma growth versus last epoch, plus 2.6%, below threshold. Tail, nil beyond PSF residual. Pass test, not met. Status, pending, threshold not crossed. No one speaks of disappointment as a feeling. Only as a statistic. Next cadence, the image analyst says, and resets her breath. The spectrograph's slit is a slice of meticulous red against the sky. Lamps are checked. Wavelength solutions are married to the atomic clock. The slit scans the nucleus plus adjacent halo with a ballet's restraint, then the pipeline walks the light through the algorithms it has learned to endure and to distrust. 0:21 and 4 seconds Universal Time Coordinated, the first spectra plot like a polite heartbeat. CO makes itself known, faint and stubbornly real. CN peaks, then thinks better of it. C2 refuses the party. The water proxy sulks. This would be unremarkable if delta V, the nudging remainder in the orbit fit, were not also making itself known with equal politeness. They overlay the two. The line flux humps. The astrometric residual kinks. The kinks and humps stare past each other like strangers who shared a train car once and will never speak of it. Spectra panel writes in its soft legalese. CO detection, yes, S/N 4.1. CN, marginal. H2O proxy, none. Temporal correlation with delta V window, absent. Pass test, not met. Status, pending, insufficient coeval signal. Geometry could still be lying, the spectroscopist offers, because fairness is oxygen here. Or we are, the statistician answers, because oxygen can also burn. They start the high-cadence photometry. A sequence of exposures, each calibrated with the care of a confession, peels away. Small variations accumulate like sand in an hourglass that insists it isn't one. 0:46 and 53 seconds Universal Time Coordinated, the photometry panel coins a phrase no one trusts easily. Quasi-period detected near 19.3 H, Q, 5. Phase stability, marginal. Amplitude, small, 0.03 mag. If this is rotation, it is rotation with an alibi. It will not yet testify that vents are steering the push. It will not yet speak to any coeval gas line. It is a whisper that could still be a building breathing. Pass test, not met. Status, pending. The polarimeter's numbers, fussy as a metronome, start to settle. Polarimetry panel. Degree of linear pole, low, 0.8 to 1.1%. Angle drift, non-stationary. Preferred sector, weak suggestion toward Jovian magnetic longitude, uncertain. Pass test, not met. Status, pending. The lead writes on her pad, not on the board, don't romanticize drift. Measure it. Astrometry delta V redraws its residual plot with every fresh centroid. The points tug a thin curve off the gravity-only fit as if plucking a hair from a comb. It is not wild. It is not theatrical. It is real. A subpanel flashes delta underscoring, few times 10m/s superscript 2, vector leaning not quite sunward, not quite radial. The confidence bar climbs a step and then plants its heel. Receipt, someone murmurs, not asking. Not that kind, the lead answers, and no one needs her to define that. Pass test for jets, not met. Status, pending, delta V persists. The Jupiter external column springs to life with the bureaucratic grace of space missions everywhere. The public auroral camera feed updates at a pace that makes human impatience look like rudeness. The radio panels update in numbers before they update in meaning. 1:23 and 10 seconds Universal Time Coordinated, auroral UV shows a brightening along the main oval. Routine, perhaps, but the intensity pulls a pencil upward on a graph someone in another building will file before breakfast. 1:27 and 44 seconds Universal Time Coordinated, chorus panel posts, intensity plus 8% in nominal band pass. Modulation hint at -19 H persists, within noise. The footnote repeats its disclaimer like a benediction against hype. 1:29 and 1 second Universal Time Coordinated, decametric network, ground-based, logs a burst that should be benign. The timestamp, when cross-checked, schemes the edge of the delta V window for 3I/Atlas as if the two events were ships passing within the same fog. The heliophysicist watching the feeds does not smile. They tick their pre-registered box labeled temporal coincidence with a pencil that was sharpened on purpose. This is not causality, they say, as if the room were a class and the class were a jury. No, the lead says. This is why we invented pending. The scoreboard has been an ice sheet all night. Now it creaks. Under a dust/gas jets, canonical, a pale hand reaches up and slides the magnet from pending to pending, constrained. Beneath it someone writes in white pen along the frame, no coeval lines, morphology under threshold. Under B, geometric efficiency, the magnet stays at pending, but a new node appears, if eta near 1, expect polar angle stability, absent. C, radiation/plasma coupling is left where it is. No one jumps. No one indulges themselves. But the hand lingers. D, speculative/field mediated, technological, is not touched. The board will not be accused of wishful thinking. They take a short break the way climbers rest, standing. The second morphology stack lands with better seeing. If the coma intends to grow, this is the hour to do it. The control comet, obedient as a textbook diagram, performs on cue. Its tail lengthens to exactly the degree the models promised. 3I/Atlas behaves like a careful liar. The halo fattens by a pixel that the pipeline punishes by annotating with a seeing coefficient larger than the pixel's hope. Morphology panel. Delta coma growth versus last epoch, plus 3.9%, seeing corrected, plus 1.1%. Tail, remains below structured detection. Pass test, not met. Status, fail, for morphology, conditional on seeing correction. A breath moves like a breeze around the room. This is a kind of verdict. The astronomers refuse to let relief dress itself as certainty. Log as conditional fail, the lead repeats. Do not promote without second stack confirming. The second stack confirms. Morphology component of pass/fail rubric, fail. On the scoreboard, under A small red dot appears next to morphology. It is only one dot. There are other tests. But dots change weather. New spectra. New patients. This time, a disciplined stare down into the near-IR sparser traffic in search of CO2's fingerprint through a proxy. The graph that appears is not zero, but it is not the crest anyone could testify to with a scientist's posture. The CO line strengthens by a whisper. The delta V kink for this interval lifts by a whisper. The whispers, compared by a sober cross-correlation, shake their heads at each other and walk away. Spectra panel. No coeval enhancement above pre-registered threshold. Pass test, not met. Status, fail, for coevality. A second red dot appears under A, on the board, spectra times delta V, fail. No one claps. No one behaves like this isn't what they suspected for weeks. Suspicion is not data. Only nights like this are. A. Dust/gas jets, canonical disfavored, provisionally. The magnet slides. Photometry has been adding ticks to its own little loop since the shutter came open. Now it tries to discover whether its 19.3-hour coyness is tonight's relative or tonight's ghost. The code lives for this. The astronomers, trained in doubt, wince when the peak of the Loam-Scargill periodogram rises like a child put on tiptoe. Photometry panel. Quasi-period near 19.2H persists, Q7. Phase alignment with previous epoch, acceptable. Correlation with line strength, absent. Pass test, not met, for jet tide periodicity. Status, pending, strong, not diagnostic. Rotation without receipts, the postdoc says under her breath. Or a clock not geared to vents, the lead murmurs back. Jupiter external posts an update with the dryness of a weather radio. Auroral UV, brightening continues, morphology perturbed near Io footprint. Chorus, amplitude plus 14% versus baseline, modulation near 19H remains at edge of significance. Magnetometer, minor sector boundary crossing. The seconded data plumber, eyes red with the kind of attention that loves its work, executes the pre-registered test without changing a comma. The result is a number, and the number is allowed to be small, and it is. We have a non-random alignment between the sector crossing clock and our delta V windows at p equals 0.018, she reads. We said we'd accept anything, 0.02 as interesting and not as proof. So, interesting. The heliophysicist prints the word on a whiteboard and circles it with a face that could be any expression at all. The room does not permit the letter E, for evidence, tonight. It allows interesting like a dog allowed on the couch only when it's raining. On C, radiation/plasma coupling, a small green dot appears next to temporal coincidence. Not an arrow. Not a flag. A dot. The all-sky camera, whose most faithful friends are Perseids and cloud edges, registers a faint, diffuse glow near the west-northwest, an elevation and azimuth that, plotted by a board intern and then checked by an unboard supervisor, point roughly at space that Jupiter nominally occupies. The glow spectrum is not the spectrum of an airplane. It is not anything like the clean green of an aurora. It is thin, reproachfully marginal. The software tags it as candidate, high-altitude radio scatter. The humans tag it as looks like noise until proven otherwise. They add it to the pre-registered log of things to try to kill in the morning. Most such candidates die at breakfast. Sometimes, they don't. On the scoreboard nothing moves. On the faces in the room, something does and is immediately told to sit down. There is a tradition in control rooms like this. At some hour when the caffeine runs like a second blood, someone will float a sentence that might be the skeleton of a press paragraph. Tonight that person is not the lead. Tonight it's the youngest astronomer in the room, who has watched the dots and the magnets and the thresholds and has learned how to ask a question without making it a pitch. If A is disfavored and B is limping, and C is collecting dots, and D is a drawer we swore not to open, how do we talk about this if pass goes empty and fail ties itself only to A? The lead does not answer with words for a moment. She looks at the clipboard labeled pass/fail/pending as if it were a face she owed the truth to, and then she says, "We say we saw force without a trace and that the sky kept time better than our models did. We assign A as disfavored, B as unproven, C as needing a better ear, and D as not tonight. Then we go back to work." The youngest astronomer puts the imagined press paragraph back under the table where it belongs. There is a moment, mean-looking and quiet, when the polarimeter delivers a drift that is finally, stubbornly, not noise. The angle rotates by 2 degrees against its own habits and holds, yawed toward a vector that a different person last week would have sworn was nonsense, a vector not neatly sunward, not neatly radial, but leaning into the same quadrant that delta V prefers. Polarimetry panel. Angle drift, 2.0 degrees plus or minus 0.6 degrees, significant at 3.3 sigma across 2 filters. Alignment with delta V vector, suggestive, cos theta, 0.75. Pass test, for jet-aligned stability still not met. Status, pending, but note, delta V aligned drift. This is not a receipt. This is an annotation on the receipt's absence. Under B, on the board, someone writes on a sticky, if a single vent, why not stability? If not a vent, why this alignment? The sticky is not an answer. It is a shaped silence. 5:05, the window narrows, the scales tilt. The night is a finite resource. The final morphology stack lands like a final witness called in a cautious court. Morphology prints a number that is kind enough to be consistent, growth remains below threshold, tail remains a rumor at the detection limit. Spectra decline to synchronize. CO continues its modest boast without looking at the delta V schedule. H2O proxy remains a rumor not ready to be told. Photometry keeps the 19-hour limp and refuses to teach it to march with any line. Astrometry keeps the push with an ascetic's regularity. On the scoreboard, the magnets settle into an arrangement that is not flashy and is not trivial. A. Dust/gas jets, disfavored, provisional. B. Geometric efficiency, pending, requires polarimetric stability, absent. C. Radiation/plasma coupling, pending, strengthening, temporal coincidence. Sector crossing. Chorus amplitude. D. Speculative/field mediated, pending, quarantined, unopened drawer, as promised. The room allows a breath. It does not allow the word victory. The heliophysicists have not blinked in human memory. Now, one of them clears their throat in the awkward way of someone about to say something that will need to be unloved in the morning if it misbehaves. Cross-check the auroral UV perturbation with the IO footprint time tag, they ask the data plumber. The overlay takes 15 seconds to compute and 2 to make everyone in the room stand a hair straighter. The IO footprint blot, a bright comma where electrodynamics write destiny on the polar sky, shows an anomalous kink in morphology that is not in the textbook. It is not a seizure. It is not art. It is a shape that analysts write down twice and then, with a frown, a third time. At the same minute mark, the delta V panel refreshed and redrew its sober kink. The two kinks do not sit atop each other. To be tidy would be to be suspect. They are separated by 11 minutes, an amount one might call a lag if one were reckless, or an interlude if one wished to keep a job. The pre-registered correlation test does not know adjectives. It knows what it was told to know. It spits a number. The number is small enough to make gloves feel tight. P equals 0.012 for the lagged alignment, the statistician says. We registered 10 minutes plus or minus 5 as an admissible lag for causality tests. This is inside that box. No one says coupling. No one says drive. These are human words and the plot is full of sky. The Jupiter external panel adds its own bureaucratic poetry. Chorus, spike plus 19%, transient, onset T, 8 minutes from delta V inflection. Magnetometer, minor sector squall. Under C, on the scoreboard, a fourth dot appears, lagged correlation. The board now looks like a constellation someone could name if they let themselves. They don't. The youngest astronomer writes 3 sentences on a pad. She shows them to no one. Later, she will tear them into strips because later is when writing belongs. What the room has, now, is a shape. The receipt did not print in light and dust. The force printed in motion. The sky printed, elsewhere. The lead observer looks at the clock and then the clipboard. We are out of night, she says, a sentence old as astronomy. We have enough for a verdict on A. We have a program for C. We have B under polite protest. We hold D like a box of matches in a dry field. She takes the magnet for A, and slides it to disfavored so cleanly it makes no sound. Put that in the minutes, she adds, and the room obeys. The dome begins to close like a curtain that believes in encores. Laptops dim themselves. The vending machine hum crescendos to a comedy of timing and then relents. A final administrative packet trickles into the Jupiter external column. It is the sort of thing no one reads with interest until they are trained to. Advisory, routine high-rate downlink rescheduled by 19H due to non-critical bandpass contamination in chorus monitor. No mission risk, housekeeping nominal. 19 hours. The number lands like a coin on its edge. It wobbles in the air of the room. Add it, the heliophysicist says without tone. The data plumber adds it to the pre-registered ledger of coincidences we do not love and cannot dismiss. The lead closes the log with a line the room will later agree was perfect because it was boring. Window 1/7 complete. Provisional verdict entered, a disfavored. C receives escalation plan. Proceed to recalculation of models per Part 6 outline. She caps her pen. The dome seals. The night exhales. Outside, Jupiter stares back across a distance that, for the first time this week, feels too short. And in the quiet between the instruments and the morning, a held question hangs, light as dust, heavy as duty. If the force borrowed energy from the sky, what debt is still unpaid? The room is daylit now. That makes it feel less like a confession and more like a deposition. On the far wall, the night scoreboard remains in place, A disfavored, B pending, C gathering dots, D quarantined, and underneath it someone has taped a fresh sheet of butcher paper, empty except for a title in block letters. How do you unmake a giant? Chairs creak to attention. Cups ring the table like small eclipses. The lead observer, hair down now, posture unsoftened, leans both palms on the plywood and says the sentence that gives the day its spine. Reconstruct it. 3 branches. One truth at a time. The camera crew, hired to document science without wounding it, rolls quietly. The first whiteboard marker uncaps like a safe. They begin with the branch that offends no one's philosophy, nature alone. On the screen blossoms a wireframe of Jupiter, not as a ball, but as a set of coupled systems: magnetosphere, ionosphere, upper atmosphere, radiation belts, Io-torus, flux tubes, field-aligned currents. Lines crisscross like music staves. Somewhere in this diagram is a melody they think they heard last night. The heliophysicist, who has learned to speak like a metronome so that their words don't inflame, points with the marker at 3 places where energy pools. Premise, they say. Our dots suggest temporal non-randomness between delta V in 3I/Atlas and variance in Jovian chorus, auroral morphology, and sector boundaries. Not causality, not yet. But suggestive. If we refuse jets as drivers, we ask, what field can push without a receipt? They draw a rectangle around magnetosphere and sketch the outline of the Io-torus, a fat donut of ionized sputter, sulfur and oxygen sputtered from a volcanic moon and held on a leash by Jupiter's field. Resonance, they say. A magnetized, rotating planet offers wave modes. Alphane waves, Whistler modes, chorus, hiss. If an object, say, a conductor with a changing cross-section, intercepts field lines and sloshes charge, it can tap these modes. The statistician writes on the butcher paper, tap is not equal to drain, but tap can trigger. Now extrapolate, the heliophysicist continues. If a perturbation, call it P, catches a sweet spot where the field is near a sector boundary crossing, small pushes can couple into large oscillations. Energy density in belts rises, precipitation increases, auroral Joule heating spikes in a pattern that maps to our dots. The simulation spins up. On screen, a false color Jupiter's aurora brightens along the main oval, then kinks near the Io footprint, not violently but persistently, a bend that isn't supposed to be. A second layer appears, thermospheric neutral temperature, and takes on the palette of fever. In the model, eddies form like fingerprints and slide down the magnetic midnight, folding and colliding. A third map, ionospheric conductivity, flares where those eddies crash. What we're illustrating, the heliophysicist narrates, is a positive feedback, wave power precipitation conductivity coupling wave power. In extremes, the feedback runs away, not infinitely, but enough to deposit catastrophic heat in the upper atmosphere, with knock-on effects. The camera gets closer, the scientist lowers their voice for the unspectacular word the moment requires. Burn. They do not show Jupiter exploding. They show a skin, hundreds of kilometers of wind and chemistry, glowing, then tearing. They show the heat pushing downward until it meets shear and steals its balance. They show zonal jets, those alabaster bands, losing their crispness like ribbon put in a bath. And inside, asks a voice by the window. The interior modeler has the distracted aura of someone who has spent years thinking about hydrogen at megabar pressures. Their hands make a motion like opening a book and finding it's a door. If the upper layers become dynamically unstable, they say, they can torque the deep flow. Jupiter is a machine of rotation. You disturb the belts up top, you scramble angular momentum down deep. Think of a barrel of syrup you twist on the surface. The torque percolates. In months, days in an extreme case, differential rotation reorganizes. Convection cells realign. Dynamo regions, where field is generated, shift in geography and intensity. Field goes wild for a spell. They layer the simulation with ghosted lines for the dynamo. The lines writhe like something that wants a new name. Reconnection events multiply. Excess field gets pulled taut and then snaps, dumping power into the plasma and, by downward connection, into the atmosphere again. Recombination, the heliophysicist adds quietly. In places where the ionization is pushed high but cooling lags, radiative losses spike. The upper atmosphere can briefly behave like a slow flame without combustion, the chemistry of radicals and ions playing a game of energy musical chairs that ends in photon emission and thermal dumping. Now the accounting, says the lead, a reminder that every romance must pay taxes. How much? What timescales? Does this destroy? The answer is cautious and sharp. To destroy in a cinematic sense, no, the interior modeler says. To strip, boil, unmake the upper 0.1% by mass, yes, if you tune the resonance and the feedback is kind to you. That skin, hundreds of Earth atmospheres by column density, could be spalled, heated, driven. For days to weeks, the planet would look wounded. The belts would blur, the great red spot could hemorrhage and shrink, storm trains would rephase. Aurora would scream. Then the behemoth would reorganize itself into a new equilibrium, colder by a percentage, emptier by a skin, angrier in some belts. The camera lingers on the simulated spot, its oval mouth thin, its palate sick. And the source, the lead presses. What turned the tap? They draw 3I/Atlas on the board as a tiny conductor with a variable effective area, a nucleus shrouded in something that plays with fields without leaving dust, dustless ions, charged sheath, plasma bubble, exotic dielectric, all natural words kept honest by question marks. The object's orientation and the sector crossing clock align in the model just enough to bring the coupling into a sharpness it shouldn't have had. No technology needed, the heliophysicist concludes. Only timing, rotation, a fat field, and the unfriendliness of resonance. On the butcher paper, natural extreme, resonant magnetosphere plus runaway auroral heating plus deep flow torque upper atmosphere burn and dynamo disturbance rapid visible reconfiguration. Next to it, without italics, requires, coincident geometry, conductor-like object, strong sector dynamics, pre-existence of Io torus richness. And a mercy, the statistician adds, half to themselves. That it didn't happen here. The camera holds on the board until the words feel heavier than ink. The second branch begins with a phrase that makes engineers smile because it is ugly and apt. Afterburner, says the orbital dynamicist, tapping the plastic of a model solar system with a pen like a stethoscope. A device that adds energy to something already moving by using a field. In our case, minimal mass loss from the object, maximum leverage from environment. He spins a simulation of the Jupiter system, Io, Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, Jupiter, and overlays the passage of 3I/Atlas through a volume that isn't empty so much as charged. Start with the smallest push we measured, he says, calling up the delta V residual plot that has become their secular scripture. You need a couple of μm/s per day sustained. You can do it with jets, but we didn't see receipts. So do it with field interaction. He draws a loop, object cuts field lines, induced electromotive forces start currents along the object's surface or sheath, Lorentz forces do work on the object's momentum vector. The object eats energy from the field the way a turbine eats a river. The river is replenished by the planet's rotation and its moon-driven plasma engine. Minimal mass changed into momentum on the object, he says. But there is exchanged energy in the system, the planet pays a surcharge in plasma power. The afterburner lights, not on the object, but in the big machine. The heliophysicist steps back in, the cost is borne in belt pumping and auroral heating. We see exactly that kind of cost signal last night. A second ingredient enters, gravitation. He pulls up charts of the L shells, imaginary shells that map magnetic field lines by where they cross the equator, and traces moon orbits against them. The Io torus again. The Alphane wings that connect moons and planet like invisible scaffolding. Now imagine, he says, phase locking. We don't need a conspiracy, just coincidence. The object's rotation, the sector boundary, the Io orbit clock, and Jupiter's own system 3 rotation drift into a near-commensurate relation for hours. In such windows, flow channels, like shipping lanes in plasma, are set up stronger and straighter than average. Coupling efficiency spikes. He toggles a switch in the sim, a flux tube brightens embarrassingly in response. If 3I/Atlas carries even a modest charge or induced dipole, it rides those lanes like rails. The small Lorentz nudges add coherently along the rail. Afterburner engaged. Inside Jupiter, consequences rhyme with the first branch, heating, belt torque, spot shock, but there is a key difference. The dynamicist puts the difference in a box so no one misses it. Key difference: the energy budget is balanced by cross terms. The object's delta V correlates with planetary energy loss over the window. Not huge, but measurable if you look in the right place. They call up last night's ledger like an accountant with a crime. Delta V kinks against chorus amplitude bumps, auroral brightening, magnetometer squalls. The numbers are small, but they don't look away. The interior modeler tightens the idea: you need little to no mass loss from 3I/Atlas for this. The receipt is in the planet, not tail, not gas lines. The kitchen smells like cooking, not the hallway. Our telescopes watched the hallway. The room laughs once, weakly, at the metaphor. Then the lead writes the important sentence underneath. Mixed drive, field-object coupling does work on small body, planetary field replenishes, collateral heat in belts and aurora, minimal dust signature. Requires charge/induction on body, phase window with system 3 and I/O, modest conductor-like geometry. Predicts lagged correlation between delta V and Jovian energy terms, negligible coma growth, polarimetric drift toward delta V vector, observed. Someone underlines lagged twice. Last night's 11 minutes feels less like a whim and more like a hinge. The dynamicist steps back. The way he exhales says he hates when nature chooses clever over honest, but he won't deny a clever thing when it leaves footprints. There is a pause before the drawer is opened, not because it is forbidden, but because it is tiring to be careful. The lead opens it anyway. We label this speculative in writing and in voice, she says, and keep our verbs conditional and our nouns non-accusatory. We posit design not as a conspiracy but as a device, field mediation by geometry and timing. We neither require intelligence nor deny it. We test whether a designed interaction could explain the force without receipt with fewer coincidences than nature alone. The engineer who moonlights as a sculptor steps to the printer and pulls a sprayed foam mock-up, faceted, non-conductive in some sectors, conductive in others, dielectric core, variable impedance skin. They hold it like a baby someone expects will ask questions. A field sail, they say. Not unheard of in thought experiments. Not efficient in vacuum without fields, but Jupiter runs fields like a city runs trams. You can angle such a sail so that interactions with field lines impart a force without needing mass ejection. You can turn it in system 3 to maximize coupling when the sector is favorable and minimize when it isn't. You could ride the Alphane wings near Io as if they were a moving walkway. They rotate the mock-up, the camera's lens addition makes it look like a chapel. With design, they continue, you also minimize telltales. Dust? None. Gas lines? Minimal and easily unsynchronized. Morphology? You keep the coma tight by deterring volatile release. Polarization? You tune surfaces to drift with the net field rather than the sun, creating the kind of delta V-aligned drift we saw. The lead's eyebrows warn, careful. The engineer offers the warning themselves. Caveats: this is not an accusation. It is a model of an interaction. The device could be natural, a fractured dielectric that behaves like a sail by accident. Or it could be something that wants to ride fields. Or it could be neither, and we are anthropomorphizing a crystal. They run a simple numerical toy, a paddle in a river that switches angle by a pre-programmed clock that matches 19 hours plus minus a little, the dockyard echo of last night's periodic whisper. The toy's delta V accumulates as a sawtooth and then smooths when you average over hours. The required torque to reorient the paddle is tiny if the paddle's moments of inertia are tuned. If there is control, the engineer says, it need not be grand. A twitch every half rotation. The sky is rich, you just need a polite ask. On the butcher paper. Speculative, field sail, geometry plus timed rotations in a magnetized environment produce sustained non-gravitational acceleration, minimal mass loss, receipts appear in the planet's fields, not in light. Requires some form of orientation control, intrinsic or not, tuned impedance surfaces, knowledge or exploitation of System 3 and sector clocks. Predicts discrete cadence in polarimetric drift, deliberate phase with chorus packets, extended absence of coma even under favorable heating. The statistician draws a line below speculative and writes in small print. Burden of proof. The arrows are not angry. They are policy. The room does not indulge itself. It lets the drawer stay open for a count of 20, then slides it shut, letting the paper show they did not pretend the drawer was empty. Reconstruction is theater until it changes a checklist. That is the hour they walk into now. On the projector, Planetary Defense, Protocol Updates, Draft. The title is drab by intent. The bullets that follow are not. 1. ADA, Field Exposure, Track to Threat Assessments. Not every risk is kinetic or chemical. Objects that couple to magnetospheres can be accelerated or can accelerate at the expense of a planet's field energy. Monitor System 3 phases and sector crossings for any passing interloper. Assign a field coupling risk score, FCRS, based on shape, conductivity proxies, rotation, proximity to moon plasma engines, e.g., Io. 2. Standardize receipt tests beyond dust. For any measured delta V, test coeval signals not only in coma lines but in external reservoirs, auroral power, chorus amplitude, belt maxima. If the receipt isn't in the light, look in the sky. 3. Build a scorecard 3.0. The old scorecard asked jets. The new one asks jets. Geometry. Field coupling. It includes 3 litmus we promised in Part 4, morphology, date-stamped spectra, periodicity/polarimetry, and adds a 4th, external energy leads/lags, Jovian, Saturnian, terrestrial if ever relevant. Each has pass, fail, pending with pre-registered thresholds. 4. Pre-register lags. We were saved last night by the fact we committed admissible lags before seeing data. Make that policy. For every external/internal test pair, freeze lag windows before go time. Don't let surprise write your statistics. 5. Simulate bad windows. Calculate future Sun, Earth, object, giant geometries that maximize field lanes. Label those bad windows. Share them. Aim telescopes. Send radio to the big planets and listen. 6. Add humility clauses to public briefings. New script. We saw force, we failed to see receipts where we expected them, we looked elsewhere, we found interesting alignments. We are updating risk not because we know, but because we cannot afford not to. Practice saying, we don't know yet, like a vow. The ethicist who has sat quiet all morning nods at that last bullet and scribbles a reminder, don't routinize fear. Routinize transparency. On the whiteboard, the lead writes unexpected delta V is not equal to malice in letters too big to be graceful. She leaves it up. Afternoons in science are for replay. They take the most stubborn frames from the night, delta V kinks, aurora kinks, chorus spikes, and cut them like a music video with none of the joy. They put the p equals 0.012 lag on screen and let it hang there. Then they kill it twice, test for multiple comparisons, ensure the trials factor is honest. It survives, not as proof, never that, but as interesting within the promised box. They rerun the polarimetry with fake stars seated at the same s/n. The 2 degrees drift refuses to die. It earns a footnote harder than some papers ever get. They rerun the morphology with a nasty assumption about seeing. The tale remains a rumor with no resources. By dinner, the team has pulled together a draft of Part VI's, event reconstruction, 3 nuanced pillars, numbers tilting toward C, A marked with the least joy a red fail has earned, D left as a sculpture that may be art or accident. And then someone says the line they have all been avoiding because it has too much theater in it, and yet it belongs. If this is how a giant can be hurt, what we watched last night wasn't an accident in the sentimental sense. It was either nature choosing a combination we hate because it is clever, or it was agency riding cleverness home. They let the sentence cool on the table. Then the ethicist cuts it into sober shape. Or, she says, we saw a warning delivered by the system to itself, that our categories are old. They rehearse the press tone with the same pre-registered discipline as their statistics. The lead stands behind a lectern that is in fact a stool with a laptop on it. Statement 1, we observed a sustained non-gravitational acceleration in 3I/Atlas, force without dust at levels our instruments should have seen. Statement 2, we found no coeval spectral receipts commensurate with the force. Jets are disfavored as the primary driver in the observation window. Statement 3, during the same window, Jupiter displayed temporally coincident enhancements in auroral power, chorus amplitude, and magnetospheric features. Our pre-registered tests mark these as interesting, not causal. Statement 4, we are testing 3 reconstructions, a natural extreme involving magnetospheric resonance, a mixed drive where field coupling acts as an afterburner, and a speculative field sail requiring minimal mass loss and geometry that could be natural or designed. Statement 5, we have updated planetary defense protocols to include field coupling risk, external receipts, and lag registration. Statement 6, we will not claim technology. We will not claim safety. We will claim work. She looks up, jaw set at a style that belongs to engineers who have had to bury feelings because a window was closing. Questions, she says to the empty room. The empty room asks them all. She answers each with a number or the phrase we don't know yet, said so evenly that it sounds like a promise, not a dodge. Night returns as an accessory. The simulation cluster breathes like a sleeping animal. In its belly, Jupiter is wounded 3 ways, heals 3 ways, remembers 3 ways. In the natural extreme, the upper atmosphere burns with a fever of 1,500 K over baseline at the auroral ovals, jets slip by dozens of m/s, the great red spot shears along its edge and loses 20% of its contrast before re-intensifying at a new latitude. The belt boundaries wander like a drunk trying to remember home. The belt winds convert some rotational energy into heat, then claw back stability. The total energy moved, 10 superscript 1, 10 superscript 1J in days, a number so large it needs a sky to hold it, and Jupiter is that sky. In the mixed drive, the computational bookkeeping is cleaner. The object's momentum budget matches a debit in Jupiter's field energy within error bars that no one likes but everyone respects. The lag that affronted them becomes the signature they lean on, a response time between field disturbance and object delta V that is constant to within minutes when the model's phase lock is tuned. The upper layers heat less catastrophically, but the belts lose crispness exactly where the flux tubes drag, and chorus sings on schedule like a train station that never learned free will. In the speculative sail, the tuning becomes eerie. Small twitches in orientation, triggered by a 19-hour script with phase coins tossed to the sector clock, produce delta V that looks like last night had a baby with forethought. The polarimetric drift in the sim, tiny, precious, leans the way the data lean. The receipt remains a planet. The object remains modest, half stealth, half leaf. No one swoons. But no one averts their eyes from D's shape as it sits there, unashamed, possible. The ethicist asks for one addition before they print. An exit ramp, she says. Whatever conclusion future data force, we commit to de-escalation in language. If technology is disfavored, we say so loudly. If nature suffices, we let wonder eat fear. The room agrees. By the gray hour that can't decide if it's late or early, the team has generated the 3 reconstruction briefs, 1-page summaries with equations light enough for TV but heavy enough to keep integrity. They contain the numbers that someone will tattoo on a blog. Required field energy transfer per delta V interval, -10 superscript 1J. Auroral joule heating anomaly, plus 30% in main oval sectors over baseline. Lag between delta V inflection and chorus spike, 11 plus or minus 3 minutes. Polarimetric drift, 2.0 degrees plus or minus 0.6 degrees aligned to delta V vector. Morphology tail, nil above PSF residual, conditional fail for jets. They archive raw and pipeline outputs side by side with checksums and pre-reg forms so a grad student 10 years from now can recreate the night and hate them less. They export a scorecard 3.0 template, for boxes, each with pass/fail/pending, and a little line below that says in small font, write it before you see it. The last act is boring, which is why it is heroic. They send requests for external data, Juno field sums. Hubble UV scraps, ground decametric logs, phrased in a register between favor and subpoena. The replies will take time. The window they opened in Part 5 promised 7, this was 1. 6 remain, each a chance to kill or confirm their romance with the field. The cluster cools. The monitors in the control room go from urgent to pastoral. For a moment, everyone allows themselves the thought that there is a life outside numbers. An email lands in the shared inbox with the sound of a dropped fork. The subject line is so administrative that it is rude. Subject, chorus monitor, automated trend note. No exclamation marks. No adjectives. Just a line. Anomaly, low-level periodic contamination at minus 19.2 H persisted across 2 stations, phase leading predicted system 3 by minus 10 minutes, flagged for investigation. No mission risk. The scientist closest to the keyboard reads it out loud and then reads it again, because sometimes numbers prank language. Phase leading, the heliophysicist says, softly, like you'd say a secret to yourself to see if it still stings. We've been seeing lag. Now someone sees lead. In the silence that follows, the lead draws an invisible line in the air between lag and lead, object and planet, afterburner and resonance, device and chance. The line is not straight. It is a curve that wants a bigger room. She caps the pen as if that could put the hour back. Window 27, she says, starts in 19 hours. No one moves. The sentence hovers, the air makes room for it. If debt was paid last night by a planet to an object or an object to a planet, the ledger has not closed. Somewhere between the field and the stone, the balance has begun to oscillate. And as the first hint of morning unbuttons the east, the question they have earned but not answered puts its hand on the door. If a giant can be unmade by timing alone, who, if anyone, keeps the clock? By the time the briefing room opened, the desert had already lost the blue that makes morning generous. Heat pressed against the glass as if memory had weight. Inside, the air held another burden, the kind that only arrives when numbers are no longer just private weather, when they must meet questions that are not equations. 3 microphones on a narrow table. A backdrop no designer would claim, off-white paint, a green exit sign, a wall clock that insisted on honesty. In the first row, local reporters with notepads, further back, national feeds shouldering each other without shame. Between them, the slow rise and fall of a room's pulse. The lead scientist, hair in a low knot, sleeves rolled, posture that comes from carrying secrets without dramatizing their mass, stepped to the center mic and rested both hands on the edge of the table. No stack of remarks. Only a single page, 6 statements, double-spaced, margins wide enough for doubt. Her voice, when it left her, was the voice of a person who had slept in the same room as a decision. Clear. Undecorated. Exact. Good morning. We're here to summarize what we consider warranted, what we consider disfavored, what we are not yet allowed to say, and how we'll behave while the sky decides whether to trust us with more. She let the first sentence land. Then the 6 statements followed, force without dust, receipts unfound where we expected and so sought elsewhere, coincident Jupiter behaviors that our pre-registered tests label interesting rather than causal, 3 reconstructions with different appetites for coincidence, a protocol update to treat field coupling as a first-class risk, a vow to claim work, not certainty. If there was theater, it was of the austere kind, where props are scorned and the script rejects adjectives like a healthy body rejects foreign matter. And yet the room felt a thing that facts alone rarely trigger. Perhaps the feeling had a word: permission. Permission to be grown-ups publicly. Permission to be frightened without surrendering to spectacle. Permission to know that not knowing can be, if shaped carefully, its own act of responsibility. Questions came. Are you saying it's aliens? Are you saying Jupiter is damaged? Are you saying comets are different now? She answered each as if she were building furniture: tight joints. No wobble, sanded edges. Speculative mechanism exists as a hypothesis with a high burden of proof. Damage is a word for human use. A planet re-equilibrates. We saw signs of heating and reconfiguration consistent with the models we tested. Comets are not new, our instruments and our obligations are. A child's voice came uninvited from the back. Someone's daughter slipped into the press lines with a phone, and asked the only question that made the room breathe differently. If it's not magic and it's not cheating, she said, what is it? The lead smiled the smile of a person who has watched grown-ups forget how to ask something clean. It's timing, she said. And timing obeys physics, even when physics is impolite. When the formalities ended, the microphones clicked down without ceremony. The cameras hurt less when they were off. People gathered their laptops and relief in the same motions. Outside, the desert turned its brightest impersonation of innocence. Inside, the work reorganized itself. The scorecard 3.0 hung in the center of the operations room like a calendar that refused birthdays. 4 boxes, each with 3 cells: pass, fail, pending. A 5th line below them in small print: write it before you see it. On the board, under morphology, fail glowed a hard red. Under date-stamped spectra, fail again, smaller but not shy. Under periodicity/polarimetry, pass hummed with the cautious pleasure of a student whose grade matches the effort rather than the charm. Under external energy leads/lags, a yellow sticky with pending sat like a held breath. The p-value that had survived the trials factor challenge lived behind that square, modest and stubborn. The team began the work that follows conclusions, not repeating them, but allowing them to change the furniture. The Planetary Defense Liaison took the draft update and seeded it into committees that once rolled their eyes at nuance. New columns appeared in old spreadsheets: FCRS, field coupling risk score, S3 phase, sector window, flux tube proximity. The acronyms, that dialect the sky forces on bureaucracies, multiplied, but this time they owed their lives to a decision rather than a delay. At the other end of the room, the ethicist wrote 3 sentences on a piece of paper and taped it above the coffee pot. We don't routinize fear, we routinize transparency. Unexpected delta V is not equal to malice. The first duty is to make our ignorance safe for other people. No one argued with the paper. It looked fragile and was not. Outside the building, on porches and in classrooms where the posters are laminated because budgets are stories, people began to talk in the register that space demands of the untrained. In a 5th grade room in El Paso, a teacher drew Jupiter's belts in chalk and added an asterisk where last night belonged. In a break room at an air traffic control center in Thessaloniki, 2 controllers argued about whether lags are meaningful when your sky is organized in minutes. In a senior center in Omaha, a man folded the local paper 3 times and said that when he had been a boy, rockets were television, but this felt like weather. His granddaughter, who had never known a world without a pocketable map of everything, looked up at the photo of the aurora and asked if planets could get fevers. He said yes. And she asked if fevers can teach you to be gentler afterward. He said he hoped so. The press did what press must, some of them brilliantly. Explanations flowered. A few narratives chose violence, headlines that made Jupiter into a patient or a crime scene, but most failed to catch. The lead's tone had inoculated the room against spectacle more effectively than any definition could have. That is a trick science rarely gets to perform. This time, it did. Under the public noise, the private machine kept time. A meeting with SETI's quieter wing, people who have trained themselves to expect almost nothing from the sky except beauty and sometimes interference, happened in a room whose windows looked at trees instead of desert. The agenda had one item: do we change methods? The answer, as always in good rooms, was yes and no. No, in that evidence remains the parent, and hope the child. No, in that signal to noise is still the only way anything earns the right to be loved. No, in that absence of dust under a clock is not a message, only a behavior. Yes, in that field mediation must become a first-order thought, not a subscript. Yes, in that cadence, specifically the 19.2-hour whisper that had begun to appear in other datasets like a watermark, should be watched, not worshipped. Yes, in that targeted looks during bad windows are not indulgence but hygiene. A new program was born with a name that sounded like an apology: Quiet Architectures. Its charter was simple: design and test methods that assume cooperation with fields rather than defiance of them. In practice, that meant building search strategies that gave preference to low-power, geometry-driven behaviors. It meant teaching algorithms to hear rhythm in plasma noise the way musicians hear it in audiences breathing. No one typed aliens into the charter. No one needed to. The room understood that if the universe ever hands you mind, it probably does so by making you smarter about environment, not heroics. On the campus where the simulation cluster breathed like a large cat in the sun, an undergraduate, whose job it was to check that the backup of the backup had been copied to the drive named Agassi 3, paused at the terminal when a logger line scrolled past. Jovian chorus monitor, periodic component stable, phase drift plus 7.9 minutes, plus or minus 2.1, versus S3. Polarimetric drift on 3I/Atlas, plus 1.8 degrees, plus or minus 0.5, aligned to delta V vector. Field coupling risk score, FCRS 7 out of 10, from 6, due to proximity to I/O phase tube. They didn't understand every word, but the shape of the words felt like a hand on a railing in a dark stairwell. It guided without insisting. They emailed the line to a professor who emailed it to the list who emailed it to the world that had agreed, for a change, to wait until the next window before declaring victory or emergency. Windows have their own ethics. The second window arrived less like a bell and more like a suggestion. Telescopes in Chile, Hawaii, the Canaries, receivers in Ukraine and South Africa, and a tiny dish on a Baltic roof with a cat sleeping underneath it. The coordination looked like theater and was in fact a budget spreadsheet that had learned to sing. Under the moon's light, men and women who had promised themselves not to be sentimental about machines allowed themselves a small affection. Not for metal. For the choreography itself. For the discipline of saying we will test the same thing the same way and refuse to be surprised into dishonesty. The second window gave them 3 gifts and 1 reprimand. Gift 1, the chorus sang again, low but measurable, the packet peaks stepping across midnight like a dancer who has learned the stage. Gift 2, the polarimetric drift repeated, smaller but aligned, as if the universe were politely saying I will not shout, you will have to learn to listen at the volume I prefer. Gift 3, the morphology remained clean, no coma growth, no frauds in the residuals, so Jet stayed disfavored and the scorecard did not have to apologize for having a spine. The reprimand, the lag that had become a comfort shifted by a few minutes, still within pre-registered windows, still consistent, but enough to remind the team that their favorite sentence, 11 minutes, was a disguise for the sentence that should govern, about 11 minutes, when geometry is kind. Statistics forgive humility. They never forgive romance. The scoreboard lights moved with a stubborn delicacy. A remained a red box with a quiet conscience. B, the mixed afterburner, saw its pending cell turn a thin green on 2 lines and hold yellow on a third. C, the natural resonance, grew a new sub-bullet. Auroral Joule heating anomaly persists at plus 18% versus baseline in oval sectors with predicted coupling. D, the field sail, refused to be promoted or demoted. It sat where it had sat, quarantined in thought, admissible in math, awaiting a piece of fruit the tree was not yet ready to bear. That night, the lead walked home alone under a sky that looked only like itself. The desert at night does not remember your graphs. It remembers your water. Coyotes wrote their arguments into the air beyond the parking lot. A train laid down a kilometer-long vowel. The lead's phone vibrated. A text from the ethicist: "We did not embarrass our ignorance today." She smiled at the phrasing. She wrote back, "Let's make that a habit rather than a mood." Weeks learn to carry themselves. Reports become chapters. Chapters learn the humility of footnotes. A paper, Non-Gravitational Forcing in 3I/Atlas with field-correlated external receipts, made its way through review like a patient through a hospital: many hands, one chart, unglamorous heroism. Its conclusion could fit inside a thimble and still be heavy. We find non-dust receipts for force, temporally consistent with external field variations. We disfavor jet-driven acceleration in the observation windows. We present 2 physical reconstructions and 1 speculative, with the second, mixed coupling, tentatively supported by lag structure. The paper did not change the price of bread. It did what papers are for: it gave other minds a place to land that did not require faith. At a workshop in Pasadena, a slide stolen from the operations room's wall, "Unexpected delta V is not equal to malice," drew an honest laugh. Later, in a session labeled Ethics of Unsettlement, the panelists argued not about aliens but about adjectives. A linguist reminded the room that metaphors are not spices but scaffolds. A philosopher asked whether phrases like hurt and wounded were arrests or accelerants to understanding. An engineer said the only ethically unambiguous adjective in the entire episode was pre-registered. The room agreed and lived. At the edges of institutions, people who care more than they are paid to care did things that no memo could have ordered. A ham radio collective wrote a plugin that let amateurs tag chorus-like audio with System 3 time. A high school in Odessa added a unit called Eddies and Empathy to a small physics elective. Its first assignment asked students to calculate an Alfvén speed in Jupiter's magnetosphere and then write 300 words about what responsibility means when your data might scare someone. A grandmother in Cochabamba knitted a scarf in alternating bands of white and red and called it belts and ovals. She didn't know why, only that the photograph in the paper had felt like weather in her chest. The team in the desert replaced the butcher paper with a framed printout, not because the words had become sacred but because smudges are how weeks erase themselves. New paper went up every Monday. 3 markers lived below it. One of them was always missing its cap and still no one scolded it. Some kinds of loss are not tragedies. They are how rooms prove they are used. Near the end, if stories about open sky can claim ends, a small meeting happened that did not deserve the importance it will be given by those who tell it later to make themselves bigger. 3 people, 2 coffees, a screen with the map of the solar system and a thin line showing the cone of uncertainty for a thing that might be a friend or a shrug. New interstellar candidate, the orbitalist said, using the tone people use when they hope to say perhaps without getting laughed at by the geometry. Early trajectory suggests high-speed hyperbolic. Albedo uncertain. Light curve, odd. Odd how? The ethicist asked, not because oddness implies meaning but because oddness implies work. 2 periods fighting. One like a tumble. One like a clock, the orbitalist said. Could be sampling. Could be greed in the data. Could be nothing. Or a lesson repeating itself, the lead said. We will not do better by wanting it to be familiar. They penciled the candidate's code into the quiet architecture schedule. They did not make a press plan. They did not rehearse adjectives. They did what they had promised themselves they would do, wrote their thresholds before the sky could seduce them into improvisation. Later that night, an email came from a colleague in Chile. It contained a single line with a screenshot of a narrow spike in a wider noise bed. Decmet station notes weak chorus packet at predicted S3 phase. No claim implied. Just a flag. No claim implied. 3 words that could be a creed. The lead put the phone face down and went to wash a coffee cup that had not asked to hold a belief. Through the kitchen window, the sky over the desert did not flicker. It did not perform. It did what it always does when you are paying too much attention to your heart. It was vast and therefore kind. After the final internal debrief, the team walked outside together because something in the body insists on air when the mind has carried theory too long. The stars made a diluted salt above the low hills. Someone pointed at a plane blinking toward Tucson and said nothing, because sometimes pointing is the whole sentence. The lead, who had spent the week being told she had composure, leaned against a railing and admitted neither relief nor dread, only the particular ache of an unfinished instrument playing a beautiful note you cannot yet name. "Here is what we can say, and I want it on the record even if the record is only this railing and you," she said to the air and to the colleagues who had earned the right to be mistaken near each other. "We know we saw force without dust. We know our receipts live in a place we were not trained to search, and we searched there and found behavior that makes physics nervous for the right reasons. We disfavor jets for the windows we watched. We find the mixed afterburner a plausible account of how small can borrow from large. We find natural resonance a plausible account of how large replies to small with more than a nod. We can write a speculative device that greedily reduces coincidence, and we cannot responsibly promote it without a fruit the tree has not offered us. We can teach our methods to hear rhythm. We can change our checklists so the next time timing tries to impersonate magic, we are not teenagers. We can speak to the public as if they were adults, because they were." She stopped. In the pause, a night bird revised its argument. The rail under their hands warmed slowly like a small animal deciding it trusted them. "And we can keep the sky open," the ethicist said, completing a sentence that deserves plural authorship. "That is the work. Not to close it with premature awe or premature protection. To leave it open and learn how to stand there without inventing monsters to justify our posture." They stood quietly. The pause was not cinematic. It was comfortable in the way good rooms are when no one needs to win. A phone lit the lead's cheek for a moment, a new email from a lab 2 time zones away. The subject line had the voice of a machine brushing its teeth: "Polarimetry run 3 complete, drift plus 1.1 degrees, plus or minus 0.4, alignment holds within 15 degrees. The message included a small image, the same tiny lean in the same stubborn direction. She pocketed the phone without reporting the numbers out loud. Some gifts are better digested than displayed. "Tomorrow," she said, and it was not a rallying cry. Only a calendar word that had learned to carry purpose. "We'll publish the scorecard template. We'll attach the pre-reg forms. We'll add the code. Then we'll go back to waiting, which is the most honest part of science." Someone exhaled the laugh of a tired person who's decided to keep the tiredness because throwing it away would be wasteful. "Waiting with work," they said. "Waiting with work," the lead repeated, as if it were a toast and the air were a glass. "If a story must have an image to keep, let it be this: a table under bad fluorescent light. 4 boxes. 3 markers. Coffee in paper cups. A printout taped to a wall. Unexpected delta V is not equal to malice. Another printout, newer, field coupling risk, standard AS of this morning. And below them, a hand, someone's, anyone's, writing pending on a line with such care that the letters resemble a small bridge. Elsewhere, a planet the size of a god turns in its sleep, belts rearranging as if a household is moving furniture. Somewhere between that giant and a dark object with a clock small enough to miss, the river of magnetism takes a breath that will, in a minute, be music. The cameras are off, the night remembers how to be silent. Work hums. People who could have used their cleverness to make something fashionable instead chose to make something honest. They wrote their thresholds before the sky could speak. Then they listened, and the listening altered them in ways that will not make a headline and will outlast those that do. At 3 in the morning a scheduled task pings softly: window March 7th, visibility nominal, pass, fail, pending. No fanfare. No drumroll. Only the instrument clearing its throat. The lead opens her laptop in the dark and, by the light of a screen trying to be kind to eyes, checks the single dashboard she trusts, Scorecard 3.0, public. For boxes, 3 colors, 1 new line that wasn't there before, added by a colleague without consulting her because that is what trust looks like in data. Fifth litmus, pilot external cadence persistence, pending, first of 5 epochs accrued, policy forbids interpretation until 3. She smiles at the insubordination, which is not insubordination at all, it is a system teaching itself to sing harmony. She closes the laptop and lets the room become a room again. When morning arrives, the air will be full of opinions and the desert full of glare. There will be funding calls and ethics memos and a high school student somewhere who will write a paragraph that begins, "I used to think science was people knowing, now I think it is people keeping promises to ask carefully." That line will deserve a better audience than the assignment it dies in. The sky will be that audience, as it always is, because it has nothing to prove and everything to offer to those who know how to ask without arraigning. And somewhere far from the desert, in a band of ionization that does not care about our schedules, a chorus packet will rise like the smallest hill. It will crest not at 11 minutes exactly, but close enough to make us feel known without encouraging vanity. We will watch it. We will say pending. We will mean alive. Soft cliffhanger, as the team disperses for coffee they don't need but have earned, an automated alert from a northern array blinks once, teal, not red, and logs a faint, periodic scatter near Saturn's auroral oval, phase shifted by +9 minutes against prediction. The system files it under quiet architectures, to test and goes still. No fanfare. Only the open question breathing where questions live best. If rhythm can cross worlds, are we listening to weather, or to a clock that keeps more than one time?